everybody. Dr. Rick Wallace dropping in on you. I hope that as you guys come into this live stream, you're coming in on a good note, you're having a good day, things are going your way. For those of you who are going to be, which the predominant number of you will be those watching it after the fact, I hope at whatever time you're watching it, again, you're having a positive day, a positive week. Things are coming together for you. If not, I encourage you to stay committed to the things that you intend to do, that you've committed to do, to intentional growth. That's a demand on all of us who are aspiring to do something that matters, something significant in this world. Doing that doesn't come easy. Being successful doesn't come easy. Being a game changer or a life changer or impacting the lives and situations of other people is not something that comes easy. It comes from uh, an unparalleled commitment to be a difference, to be someone who is not simply in the game just to move along with the flow. And I mean that in so many different ways, not just in what we're going to talk about today, but in every area of your life. You should want to be a game changer. You should want to be somebody who's never going to be satisfied with the status quo, that you're never just going to sit back and accept things because it's convenient, because it's easy, and because you don't want to deal with the consequences of challenging things that don't do you or those you care about any good. And on that note, I'm going to move on. Before I get into what I want to talk about, as always, we're going to encourage you and challenge you to support the work that we're doing here at the Odyssey Project. I'm not going to get into all the stuff that we do. If you followed us from the other channel, from the site, from the work we do, or maybe you even called in and asked us to help you with a current situation or at some point in time. You know what we do. Those who don't, you can easily go to the site and get a lot of resources, get information, check us out, go back, whatever you need to do to figure out what we do. But for those of you who are aware of Black Men Lead, Restoring Ghettos Forgotten Daughters, Music is Life, and so many other programs, as well as the new mental health initiative that we kicked off to focus on, but not be limited to, the mental health issues with young Black males. That is a major problem in so many different ways. We definitely need your support. It's easy to support us. Every video that is dealing with the Black community is always going to have at the first paragraph all the information you need to give. You can give by going to the site. You can give by going to GoFundMe. You can give through the Odyssey Project Cash App account, whatever works for you. Got that out of the way, thank God. Now, before I get off into this whole Tyler Perry Fall from Grace thing and my take on the totality of that, which I hope will be unique in that I'm not coming to critique uh, the movie as much as I am to talk about a more deeper element as it pertains to Black women. Before I do that, I want to talk about a couple of comments that came in. Those of you who follow me know I rarely get in back and forth on my videos or on my other social media posts. I tend to believe that I put enough work in, that I post things that are verifiable, that can be fact checked, and that a person can sit down and establish a sense of position on. And rarely do I come in and go back and forth. I responded to one comment uh, because I wanted to make something clear, and it was early in the process, so I happened to see it. You know, I don't scan and go down long lists, but like if it's the first comment or the second or third comment, I might get a chance to see it. And there were two people who challenged the notion on the last video I uploaded about the fact that we've got to do a better job of managing our money, that we need a collective spending agenda, that we must move from a mindset of consumerism and individualism to one of unity and understanding the responsibility of managing how we spend, that we invest far too much of our energy and resources into the political arena without understanding how it works, and that we won't get as much footage without first having an economic floor on which to stand. And when a person wants to engage what I've said without an understanding of political science, without understanding of military science, without an understanding of socioeconomics and how the game is played, you will get responses like the ones I got. And I just want to sit up and say that in order to understand what I'm talking about, you have to have at least a minimal perspicacity of what I'm talking about. You have to have done some research, some reading. You got to have some years of reading to understand the dynamics of what I'm talking about. Because see, there's a historical context, there's an economic context, there's a political context, and there is a strategic context to everything that I'm saying. I am not saying that I'm right 100% of the time. For those who have followed me for any stretch of time, you know there have been times that I've come back and I've apologized and recanted because I overspoke or I misspoke based off of, normally it's not on a strategic situation, it's more on something that comes out and I find out later that I didn't have all the information. I try not to do that, which means a lot of times I come in long after it's trended with my assessment because I like to have all of the elements and components so that I can look at it and analyze it to the best of my ability. When you tend to jump on things because they're hot and they're going to get a lot of likes and a lot of views, you tend to be wrong a lot because you don't have all of the information. I try not to do that sometimes. Uh, the way something hits me gets the best of me and I jump in a little too quick and I've come back, I've apologized. Also, there have been times that people have brought to me other points of view, but they did it from an educated perspective. When I say educated, it has nothing to do with academics. It has to do with a willingness to learn something and know something about something and be speaking not from emotion, but from understanding. And when people come to me like that, especially when they do it respectfully, I will come in and say, hey, I never thought about that. I never looked at it that way. Thank you for your contribution. This is one of the reasons why I am an advocate and champion of think tanks because no one person knows it all. No one person has all the answers. And so to sit up and, make the arrogant assumption of myself that I've got it all figured out would be foolish and misleading and non-productive. That's not what I work. I put a lot of time, I'm talking 30 years plus of research into understanding what I talk about. And I still know I've got a lot more to learn and understand, but I put the time in, energy in every day to do this. This isn't a bypass, I'm not a YouTuber, quote unquote, in that sense that my profession is doing videos. YouTube is a platform through which I share a synopsis of the things that I develop, I learn, I understand, the programs I've created based off of what I understand, the work that I consistently do to share with people who are like-minded and looking to do something and be a part of something that will make a difference. And what I'm saying is when people come and they talk about there's no money, relatively speaking, 1.3 to 1.4 trillion dollars, which is verifiable. And it's verifiable because they're counting on us spending it in their economy. And when that's challenged, when the idea that there's not enough money to open salons, whatever the person says, there's not enough, and you're talking about a situation in which blacks literally generate 96% of the revenue in the health and beauty industry alone. That's 96% of a $15 billion industry, which comes out to about $14.4 billion annually, and own less than 3% of that industry. That's a problem. You should always, just in simple economics, as a group collective concept, when you talk about integrated vertical economics, you should own the majority percentage of any industry that you dominate the spending. It just simply makes good economic sense that if we're dominating the spending in an industry, we should also dominate the ownership in the industry. We're the total reverse. In industries that we dominate, we have very little ownership, and it's because of a mindset. It's because of some other mechanisms that are in play that are meant to stop us. But first of all, we have to have the mindset and the desire to do so. Then we can start talking about hey, how you doing, Dr. Princess MD? We can start talking about ways to overcome those mechanisms that are set in place to block us. You know, we talk in you know, and it's hard to argue if you've done your research with my assessment that we have wasteful spending. It is not a shame tactic, it is a truth. We can sit up and talk about what we don't have. If you take the 1.3, which is closer to 1.4 trillion right now, and you sit up and say, okay, how does that look when you compare that to the economic revenues of nations? There are 200 and something nations that are recognized in this world. We would be in the top 10 on revenue if it was based just on revenue. So don't tell me what we can't do. I can tell you of a person I know of personally that never made more than $12 an hour their entire life, was a parking lot attendant their entire life, but decided that they were going to do something other than just get paid and pay bills, that they were going to make some sacrifices and invest in some things and retired worth $1 million. A black man. I can tell you another man who never earned more than $14,000 a year his entire life, but was convinced by a wealthy man who he had a conversation with to take 20% of that every month and invested in indexing, which is compound growth. And over 25 and 30 years of working and at the top of his career, making $14,000 a year, retired worth $72 million. His name is Theodore Johnson. Look him up. So don't tell me what can't be done. What it is when you're spending in a way to keep up with an environment so that you can look like you're something that you're not, to appease and impress people that don't care about you and you don't like. That's wasteful spending. When you're buying $125, $145 pair of shoes that don't do anything better than the 35, 40, 50, 60, $70 pair of shoes, you got to say, okay, that was $60 that can spend. Something that changed my life economically at a time when I wasn't hurting for money and would do stupid stuff with money. And it was probably in 95, somewhere around the mid 90s for sure. And I was watching this commercial. It was either a Morgan Stanley or a Schwab commercial. And it showed this beautiful Breitling watch. I think it was maybe a $6,000 watch, $5,995 watch. And it says, if you spend this $5,995 on this watch, this is what it's going to cost you over the course of the next 20 to 25 years. And it had like this number up there, like 250,000. What they were doing was showing the 5,000 you put in that, if it would have been put off into the right type of situation over the course of 20 years and grew through compound growth, which is a mechanism that every last person should know about and be practicing. If it was actually done that, you would have made 220,000 out of the 5,995 that you spent, which is mismanagement of funds. And most people aren't thinking like that. So that changed my mindset about a lot of things that I used to do. And it's something that's constantly on my mind. And we're just talking about basic economics right now. Basic economics on a group scale. And then a person weighed in that they don't believe in group think. They don't believe in that. Then you're not going to understand anything I talk about, because a person who is individualized to the point that they don't think from a group perspective is always at a disadvantage, but they don't know it. Probably because they're doing okay in their own life and they don't see the collective struggle. And if there's a collective struggle, there has to be a collective energy working on overcoming the collective struggle, and that those who are doing well have to be willing to work with those who are not in order to fix the collective struggle. Because guess what? While those who are struggling are going to be the first to fall off, guess who the next targets are going to be once they have nobody to insulate them and underride them and undergird them, and they are absolutely no threat because their numbers are too small. That's right, the blacks who are doing pretty good for themselves. So you have to understand how this works. That's why I say, if you don't understand political science, if you don't understand economic science, if you don't understand military science, then you're not going to understand the scope of what I'm speaking about on a daily basis on this channel. And my thing is, you have to have somewhat of an understanding just to be able to sit up and contribute. You can't contribute off your feelings. Uh, I'm not shaming anybody. I'm telling the truth. You got other groups that come over here. I've dealt with a lot of groups from the Hispanic community that are coming from south of the border into this country, whether they're coming illegally or whether they're coming legally. The one thing I can tell you is they group together. They have rules. I can tell you from having dealt directly in the early 2000s, the late 1900s and the early 2000s. I can tell you personally from having dealt in the uh, loose gem industry, diamonds, rubies, things of that nature, and dealing primarily with Jews, that they have a code of behavior economically, politically, and having also had a mentor that when I first got started in this game in business 30 some years ago, 30, 31, 32 years ago, that taught me some of the things that I understand about their community. They cannot like each other, but it comes to someone outside of their community, they handle them differently than they handle one another. They are going to operate and keep their money within the scope of their community as long as they can. They practice their economics vertically. They only move horizontally across into other economic fields when it benefits the vertical sphere. So, in other words, they keep their money bouncing around. And the longer you bounce the money, the more power it has in the community, the more ability it has in growing and expanding itself within the community. Because anytime you spend it out of the community, now you got to trust that wherever you spent it will somehow come back. The problem is nobody's investing in the black community that isn't trying to take the black community from black people, i.e., gentrification. So if we want to actually empower ourselves, we have to spend within ourselves. And if we don't have it, we've got to find a way to build it. That's the only way we're going to sustain ourselves. I've done papers on serial forced displacement. Serial forced displacement, the end game now is gentrification, where they're literally coming in, running down property values by doing a number of different practices. Once the property values have gone down, you got certain investors that are coming in that don't look like us, buying up the properties at pennies on the dollar, then all of a sudden putting up strategic businesses that start to drive the property value up. Now, those who are left in the community that weren't pushed out initially by a number of different practices, from high policing to a bunch of other stuff. Now they're being literally forced out because they can't afford to pay their property taxes because the property value is going up so high they can't afford the property taxes. So then they're being pushed out. And then that's another black community where they've been dispersed, because when they're dispersed out of that community, how many people can understand the fact that it's not likely that they're going to all go find the place together, one big community, and settle again? No, they're being dispersed all over the place where they lose the ability to group together and vote their interests. For those who didn't understand what I meant about uh, putting too much energy and effort into politics without understanding economics. I'm giving a crash course here so that people understand where I'm coming from. You know, you have to understand something. One of the biggest problems we have is that we don't understand how things work. You got Gambia, unbelievable gold mines in Gambia. The problem is they didn't know how to mine and manage the mining of their gold. So they had a company come in and cut a contract with them that they would mine the gold, and they bought the rights to the gold. And what they did is they bought the rights to the gold for 75 million. Yes, million, not billion, $75 million to a country that's poor, to a country that's struggling with HIV, to a country that's in the pits of poverty. They bought it for $75 million. They turned around and within 3 months paid the $75 million, now taking ownership of the mines and paying Gambia a mere 5% of all revenue generated from the mines. And Gambia could have paid them as consultants to come in to teach them how to mine it themselves, give them what the 5% they're getting, and actually had $1 billion a month or whatever coming out of the mines. But they didn't understand how things work, so they were taken advantage of. That happens to us consistently because we don't know how things work. We are consistently mishandled, misguided, misled, misinformed, And we run around regurgitating what we've heard through the narratives we've been given because we haven't taken time to truly understand what is being done to us. We have a responsibility to understand how things work if we ever uh, 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 desire to actually come out of this. So and this is just the tip of the iceberg of understanding the way things are being done and how we are being mishandled and how we've been convinced to be consumers instead of investors and how we've been convinced to be individualized in our thinking, and so we don't think as a group. I'm telling you, in dealing with Mexicans, I watched them operate as groups. I've watched Mexicans come in, literally. I have actually seen this with my own eyes in a neighborhood in which my cousin lived. They called me and told me, hey, some Mexican guys just bought a house, and you're not going to believe this. You need to come over here. These guys bought the house. They came. How my cousin called me was they came over and asked him. The people who abandoned the house left cars in the yard. They bought the house for pennies on the dollar. It needed a lot of work, and so they bought it from the bank who had foreclosed on it, and for pennies on the dollar. And what happened is one guy shows up and asks him who the cars belong to because he wants to let them come get it because he didn't pay for the cars and he wants them out the yard. And that's what brought my cousin into it. He says, but you need to see what's happening. So by the time I got there, it was the evening. They had gotten off from their jobs, whatever their jobs were. And they were there. They were setting up lights where they were running generator lights into the house because the house didn't have lighting, and it was like probably 10 or 15 of them. They had all gotten together to come over, and they went in this house. They literally ripped up the floors, gutted the walls, done the demolition. Now, check this out. They did the demolition and the rehab in the same freaking night. It was like 10 or something of them. The only thing they had left to do to that house when they finished it, when they left that morning to go back to work, was paint and lay the flooring. They had ripped all the flooring up, put all the drywalling in, redid the wiring, updated the plumbing, all of that stuff in one freaking night. Now, that was a crew of them that got together, and he told me the way they do it is each person, they go out and they buy these things, and then they decide what person's going to live in there, or it may be multiple families going to live in there. And what they do is they go in as one big group, and very quickly they make it livable. They put their people in it, and then the next person is those people are going to save while they live in that house as a group environment, and they're going to support one another. The men are going to go out to work, the women are going to keep things going, raise the children, do all that stuff. And then what'll happen is the next group, they're going to go out and buy another home, and eventually they'll all end up with their own homes paid for in full through group collective economics. And we're sitting around here talking about I can buy what I want to buy. I do what I want to be, and one paycheck away from going broke and being homeless. And then want to complain and point fingers all the time when we're simply not operating as a unit. You don't have to think group if you don't want to. But understand, all of the people who have a benefit in your demise, they are working and operating as a group. Even if they don't get along with each other, when it comes to dealing with you, everybody's dealing with you as a collective. If you think I'm kidding, watch what happens when a cop kills an unarmed black man and it looks like they're going to get hemmed up. Watch how fast these white people come together and support them with their GoFundMe or whatever fundraising they're doing to pay for their legal bills and everything else, knowing that what they did wasn't right. Because if what they did would have been done to one of their children, they would have wanted them prosecuted. But what they do is get on code. The code says when anybody moves against one of us that's not one of us, we stand up and defend us. Now, we'll deal with each other, but we're not going to let anybody from the outside come in and do anything that's going to harm one of us. And they consistently do it. It's in the system. All you got to do is sit up and watch it. This is all verifiable stuff. I just had to sit up and bring that out because people sit up and we talk. We've got to get out of the habit of talking and responding emotionally to things. We've got to get out of the habit of sitting around and thinking and taking the feelings. Number one is when you talk about mainstream media, there are primarily 6 mainstream companies that are owned by 6 individuals, and 13,000 and something out of 13,000. So I think it's like 81 to 84 media outlets that are owned by these 6 companies or these 6 individuals. It's a bunch of companies, but 6 individuals own all of it. And who do you think is controlling the narrative? When you sit up and you look at all these new black prosecutors that are being pushed, predominantly female, but sometimes male, black prosecutors that are being put in, who do you think are funding the vast majority of that? Almost to a man, George Soros. So what is George Soros doing? He's bypassing policy and law by handpicking those who will actually enforce it. Now, I'm going to fund your campaign. I'm going to get you in office. I'm going to be the money behind you. When you get in, I don't like the way this is done, so we're not going to prosecute that. We're going to prosecute this heavily. That's bypassing policy and government. So how is politics going to stop that? Because the person who is controlling who's getting in the seat is the person with the money. And then the person with the money who's controlling who's getting the seat is controlling the person in the seat and saying what policies will be enforced and which ones will not be. That's the way the game is being played. And if you don't understand that, you're still thinking because I voted for you, I've got a seat or a stage or an audience with you, and I can come to you and tell my problems, and you're going to actually do something about my problems. The problem is that hasn't worked for us. That hasn't worked for us since we've been free as slaves. That hasn't worked for us since the Voting Rights Bill, which was only a bill that primarily impacted the South because of Reconstruction. Those who don't understand Reconstruction, I know I haven't even gotten to Tyler Perry. That's not a big, long thing. I can handle that in about 5 minutes, where I'm coming from with that. But those who understand Reconstruction, Reconstruction represents the first 12 years after the Civil War ended. It is actually in the South where the South on the surface lost. They surrendered. Certain people went to jail, but they surrendered and admitted defeat. The problem is they never stopped fighting. And that's what people don't get. People always talk about the South losing the war. That's because they don't study history. The South didn't lose. Well, let me ask you a question. If the South actually lost the Civil War, why do we still have statues of all of the Confederate heroes on all these buildings that the last 5 years everybody's been fighting to get taken down? Why is it that the Confederate flag is flown proudly on so many places? As a matter of fact, was on certain state capitol buildings until recent years. Why is it that in 1960s we were still fighting to be able to allow blacks to vote in certain states in the South when we got the right to vote through the 13th Amendment, which talked about the abolishment of slavery and the citizenship of black people? So tell me again, how did the South lose? No, what they did is they went to guerrilla warfare. They stopped fighting with regiments and soldiers, and they started bombing Union installations and forts and other places where Union soldiers were set up to maintain peace and order and make sure everything stays in place. What happened is they caused so much damage financially and so much life from these clandestine bombings, primarily done by the Ku Klux Klan. This is where the formulation started. And so what happened is the Union withdrew their troops. Guess what happened? Things went back. The only thing that did not change with any real true distinction was the fact that black people were, quote unquote, not slaves, but that was convict leasing, where they made almost anything that a poor unhoused slave could do illegal. And there were people who were being jailed for up to 12 years for vagrancy and then being leased back out to the very plantation that they had been set free from to work for free and pennies on the dollar for the plantation owner, which was still an economic advantage that worked and came, for decades before they put an end to that. And then they replaced that with sharecropping, which sharecroppers never, ever broke even enough to make money to support their families. And I could go on and on just in the economic element of that thing. Again, not knowing how things work, or have you saying things you don't understand and believing they're true because they've been force fed to you by a media that's owned by the people who want to mislead you because they benefit from our ignorance. I could go on with that, but here's the thing. If you don't understand that era, you're not going to understand this one. You're not going to understand slavery by another name. You're not going to understand the new Jim Crow. You're not going to understand it because, see, you've been convinced because you make a few dollars and you live maybe even in the same neighborhood with some of them, you believe you made it. But see, I have a saying, and I'm going to end this part of this segment. I'm going to end it on this note. I have a saying that as long as I remain an anomaly among my people, I have failed in the responsibility of empowering my people. And that's how I see things. Just because I make it don't mean we made it. And because I identify with my people 100%, then I haven't made it. I've gotten through the cracks, but I haven't made it. When I made it, I can look around me and see many black men like me consistently moving and providing for their families, protecting their families, loving their families, building communities, and having a place that we can sit up and call our own and stand firmly on and square our shoulders with pride because we built something for ourselves. And until that happens, we're going to always be in last place because this system was designed to keep us in last place. And then we go along and actually participate in the system that keeps us in last place without understanding how. On that note, I'm going to switch on over to the Tyler Perry thing. It's probably going to be less passion from me, and then maybe not because I feel strongly about what I'm about to say. But I'm gonna move on this. First of all, let me start by clarifying some stuff. Hold on, John ETA is asking, what is that affluent black town in Texas? That was Slocum, Texas. Slocum, Texas was just like Tulsa, Rosewood, Wilmington, and a number of other different black enclaves that were thriving back in the early 1900s. And it ended up being destroyed in the same way that Tulsa, Rosewood, and Wilmington done through a massacre committed by white people. It's Slocum, Texas. Anyway, um, there is a new version of that now that I'm very excited about, and it's consistently growing. It's called DeSoto, Texas, right outside of Dallas. 60 to 70% black ownership, uh, 60 to 75% black business ownership, and it's thriving. They don't know what to do about it right now up there. So I'm excited about that. There are places where things are happening. But this Tyler Perry thing, let's get to it so I can get off of here. Um, First and foremost, I can't give you critiques from a personal perspective on the movie itself. I have chosen not to watch it. I'm not judgmental of those who choose to watch it. I'm not here to talk down on anybody that sees my viewpoint indifferent. I think we do enough of that. I'm here to challenge people to think. I'm here to challenge people to be very careful. I am going to make a statement, and it's not going to come across as positive to a significant number of people, and I'm prepared for that. Personally, I have nothing against Tyler Perry in that I understand his story. I've taken time to get to know who he is and where he comes from and what he does. And I see him as I see a lot of black people who come from some darkness and achieve a high level of light in way of financial success. And so I deal with how I deal with that. And I would be lying if I didn't say there was a point in time where I was enamored by the whole Madea thing because it was funny. Because who can't relate to it? It's when I began to see a pattern. Um, and there is the professionalism pattern, and then there is the exploitation of our women pattern. I'm going to talk about the professionalism pattern. Tyler Perry has this is he's opened his own big huge studio now, but this is the first time he had a studio in Atlanta prior to this. It just wasn't as comprehensive as this, and he was able to do his own thing his own way. He didn't have to get permission from Hollywood studios to do a movie or run a show. He was his own showrunner. He was his own studio exec. He was his own director in many cases. He gave jobs and opportunities to black actors. Something that when you're going to create an analysis of who he is and what he's done, you have to acknowledge that first. That he did. He gave job to black actors that wouldn't be acting. He helped revive some careers of actors and actresses that had sort of dwindle under the new lights of Hollywood. He did that. So I give him credit for that. The first problem I have, though, is in the quality that is presented. A lot of people are talking about some of the things that uh, I can't think of the word I want to use, but definitely things that should have been outtakes and edited out of the movie, or more effort should have been into, like the white guy in the restaurant, air eating his food and drinking from an empty cup. Some of the cheesy wigs that were worn, some of the things that people have brought up and told me about, that didn't surprise me because Tyler brags about shooting this in less than 7 days, and he did the same thing with Boo 2, because Boo, the original Boo movie, did so well. He shot the other one. Now, obviously, you spend less money when you shoot that short, but you also take away from the ability to put quality in. You're overworking people on long days, and you're not giving yourself time enough to get the best take. So we're trying to get everything in one take. We're trying to get some things done. Um, that produces poor quality. If you're talking about the quality thing and whether it's cheesy or not, and you're asking your audience to ignore things that are obvious and just focus on what you want them to focus on. You're creating a background, but you don't want the background to be critiqued. You just want it to kind of create some idea, a notion. That's the simple part of it. That's something he's been doing, and he's able to do it because nothing is being demanded. We're not demanding quality. We're letting him shoot 5-day movies, and we're selling them out, and we're accepting it because it tantalizes our emotions because we can connect with so many of the characters. And again, sometimes that works out as therapy. I'll give you that. Sometimes it gives you a chance to laugh when everything in your life makes you want to cry. Sometimes it forms a vacuum or conduit of escapism. I can see how people can get caught up in that. And that's not what I'm attacking. We need a better uh, form of coping, a better form of healing. We need something real. And I think movies have a place in that when they're done correctly. I think that we need a balance of what we're seeing and not so much exploitation of Black female suffering. Because, yes, we have women who are going through suffering. Anybody who knows me knows that I have fought ferociously for the uplifting of the Black woman, for the protection of the Black woman, for the healing of the Black woman, for the loving of the Black woman. I demanded of the young boys that come in as a part of the Black Man Lead Rite of Passage program. First thing on the list. Matter of fact, hold on one second. The first thing that a young male who joins the Black Man Lead program gets, I don't know if the light is hitting it right where you can see it, is this little form. And on it, it is the 11 principles of Black manhood. The first principle says, a Black man never harms, mistreats, or disrespects a Black woman, includes all females, uh, which includes girls. So, in other words, that's the first thing you're taught, is that we don't mishandle our women, we don't mishandle our females, we don't mishandle our girls. And yet, we know right now that the leading cause of death for Black women between the age of 15 and 44 is intimate partner homicide, with the predominant number of those being from Black men. So we know that we need to deal with that. That's an issue, and that's something that I'm stressing. So I'm coming from a place of passion when I talk about the exploitation of the suffering of Black women. Well, if you look at Tyler's movie, he has literally made an empire off of the suffering of Black women. And I think that there has to be a place of this. I think that you need to tell that story. You got to understand Tyler's history, what's going on in Tyler's life, to kind of understand where he's coming from, what he went through. With the absence of his father, with being molested as a child, with being poor and being in his car, and all the other things that he had to do to get where he's at. Not taking anything away from that, and applauding the fortitude it takes to get through that. See, it's rarely a situation where a person is all good or all bad. So when you start to assess them, you have to take that into consideration. I think that he has definitely presented some pluses. Some of the work that he's done in the community, some of the help that he's extended to people that they would not have otherwise got help. I think we have to consider that. And this isn't to go down and just on an all-out assault on Tyler Perry. This is to bring attention to a need that we've got to be a lot more balanced in what we're presenting by way of the media we have. I don't have Tyler's resources to do the media the way I do, but I have my little media platform, relatively speaking, through which I can speak and I can share. And I need to have balance. I need to talk about the importance of men, black men loving on black women, and where black men have failed black women. But I must also talk about how black men are striving to be better, how black men are obviously struggling with mental health issues that they don't have a safe space to operate in. Bringing the balance to both sides. It's not just these horrible black men that are dogging black women and there aren't any good black men, or that black men don't have things they're facing, or they don't have a target on their back. We got to talk about the entire scope of the struggle in order to have a realistic chance of overcoming it. So when I'm talking about this isn't an assault on Tyler Perry. This is a call and a challenge. I don't know if he'll get it or not. I mean, I doubt it. But my challenge is, we would love to see movies that the woman is not coming from an abusive situation. And I know it's hard because if you look at the statistics, it's representative of statistics to an extent. When you talk about on the high end, the more radical numbers say 60% of black women are molested as children. Now, the conservative numbers aren't much better, because some people say that's radical, that's probably not from good empirical data. And so they'll say, no, that's not. But the conservative numbers still have it over 40%. That's way too many of our women being exposed to some form of childhood sexual abuse. Before they ever hit adulthood, they've been traumatized to a point that it makes them dysfunctional and often non-compatible and confused, frustrated, angry, and so many other things. And we wonder why we're getting the results we're getting out of our relationships. And that's not even talking about the brokenness of the black man and what he's going through. So my thing is, I have a problem with it because that has become what Tyler Perry has to eat from. He knows if he makes a movie, Diary of a Mad Black Woman, Muddy's Family Reunion, we talk about Muddy's Family Reunion, but the primary issue of Muddy's Family Reunion is this woman being beaten by her fiance, and her mom, who sold her sister to survive, her older sister to survive, is pushing her in this because that's the next phase of the family survival, is to get her in with this wealthy guy. And you can go on and on with the movies, and there's always some issue with the black female being exploited. And most of the time being exploited by the black man. Is it painting a false narrative? Absolutely not. That's an issue we've got to deal with. Problem is, if you always paint the problem and you never paint the solution, there's going to be the perpetuation of the problem. If all I ever did was talk about the miseducation of black youth, if all I ever talked about was the lack of proper racial socialization for young black males, if all I ever talked about was the silent condemnation of incest and sexual abuse of young girls in black homes, if all I ever did was talk about it, I never presented solutions, I never offered opportunities to heal, I never offered to be a part of the solution, then I would be a part of the problem. It's got to be a solution. You can talk about it, but we would like to see more than just a 5-minute segment at the end where the woman wins. You know, you know, we would like to see the strong black woman that we often talk about, who comes in and the entire movie is about her making her way and doing something positive. The entire movie is about real black love. It exists. There are men out there who have loved their woman from day one. There are men out there who have never exploited another a black woman. There are men out there who have learned from past mistakes and are unbelievable in the way they love their current spouse or their current mate. We need to see that, because you got to understand that these people who are watching this, who can relate to it, are watching it with their kids. They're watching it with their kids, and their kids are taking this in, and we understand, because we put in the work, what this does, the subconscious programming that takes place when we watch this. You got to understand that what we see repetitively, the mind is downloading. And if all we see is traumatized, victimized black women, We'll literally see traumatized, victimized Black women over and over again. It doesn't inspire without offering the solution. So, yes, you need to bring attention to what Black women are going through. And it's interesting that Tyler, being a man, has a stronger identity with the female side of things. This is me, not me attacking his sexuality. This is me talking about his history. This is me talking about what he had to go through and what he had to overcome and how he did it. What we're dealing with is an expansion and presentation of how Tyler coped with what he struggled with and how he came out of it. See, he's telling you through Madea that the strongest Black presence in the Black community is the Black grandmother. And while that is probably statistically true, we know it's not completely true in that there are some strong Black grandfathers out there as well. There's some strong Black fathers who are out there. But what we have to deal with is the fact that statistically speaking, there are a lot of strong Black women who have children and grandchildren that are the matriarchs of their family with no patriarchal presence. And so what happens? The entire influence on existence comes from a female perspective. And that's going to leave you imbalanced. Why? Because we learn by what? By modeling. We learn by observation. We learn by practicing what we see. And if we don't see manhood practiced and modeled and presented by way of a man, we can only tell a young boy what they should be, but they're going to primarily do what they see. And if what they see in the movies and entertainment is in rap music and all other types of media is Black men dismissing, marginalizing, victimizing Black women, we're going to consistently have a problem. So when someone has the power of a Tyler Perry, when someone has the power that they don't have to get their stuff okayed by Hollywood executives because they're running everything directly from their own lot. This is a chance to produce content that will enlighten and empower. Now, some may argue that some of the reasons why not is because they will let him do his own thing as long as the Black woman is the power force in it, and the Black man is the idiot and the victim and the villain. They'll let that. But when you start making the Black man the source of power, when you start making the Black man the solution, when you start making the Black man the protector, see, that becomes a problem in mainstream media. And you wonder how much freedom will Tyler actually have in doing that. But I believe that as a Black man, you have to challenge that. You have to challenge the common narrative. You have to challenge what they're sitting up and trying to push. And you have to be willing to take the heat that comes with it. See, if it's all about the money, you got that. And we see you getting your paper. We see you getting your paper. I'm not mad at anybody that's getting their paper because paper is power around here. But are you getting your paper at the expense of our people? Are you selling them a narrative that's not going to benefit them in the long run? It's going to give them some feel good at times. It's going to give them a real visual of what's going on. It may even in some way explain why it's happening. But is it offering a solution? Is it offering an alternative to what we are already experiencing in this world? We don't need to be on replay anymore, Tyler. What we need is someone who has the resources that's willing to go against the grain and present an alternative by way of subliminal programming to the masses that says it's different, that you don't have to be a dope dealer to come out of the hood, that you don't have to run fast and jump high to come out of the hood, that you can literally put your mind to use, and that you have an imagination that is unbridled creativity in which you can create something that doesn't exist and your family can eat forever. When are we going to start creating those narratives? When are we going to take the power that exists in Tyler Perry Studios and start writing narratives where it's a positive, where it's not a negative drain on emotions, where it's not drudging up old memories and causing people to have relapses in what's going on, where it's not fueling a gender war, where we're starting the process of healing. So we need people in these positions. This is what I'm talking about. They will gladly allow a few of us to get through and make it and have, as long as we are not empowering the rest. So the challenge is for those who have the power to step up and speak power to truth for the purpose of empowering our people. You have to have people who are willing to move against the norm because the norm does not represent our empowerment. Again, nothing personal against Tyler Perry because each of us have walked our journey. But each of us must be held accountable for what we gain and what we do with it and how we get it. If we're not taking what we're getting from our people and turning around and replanting and growing it and putting back into our people through the mechanisms we have, and he has one of the most powerful mechanisms there is. That's the media. The media has controlled the thinking of the people for decades. Go all the way back to the 30s and the propagandas the propaganda models that Hitler drafted from our propaganda scientists here in America that allowed him to literally lead an entire country into a war and almost succeeded in destroying an entire group of people because he understood how to use these things to control the way people think. It took a year-long propaganda uh, campaign of painting Jews in a negative light and saying that the dynasty of the German Empire, quote unquote, was dying, created an irrational fear of Jews and hatred of Jews, and pretty much allowed the Germans who had nothing personally against Jews to sit idly by and watch them literally exterminated based off of propaganda. He painted Jewish men as rapists. He painted them as pedophiles. He painted them as financial and economic pirates. And he turned a large number of the German population against them. And this is a man that came in that wasn't even German. That's how powerful pop propaganda is. If you haven't ever studied propaganda, start with a book by the name Propaganda, written by Edward Bernays. Another one that you would probably want to read is Brainwashed by Tom Burrell. And it gives you an insight into how the marketing industry is literally being used to control the way you think, how you see things, how you interpret things, how you think and move. You have to be careful what goes into your gates, your eyes, especially your eyes and your ears, because many times it's traveling inside while your conscious mind isn't standing guard. And imagine your conscious mind having to literally rebut 85 to 90% of what is coming in the gates because it's all working against you. That tires your conscious. And what happens is eventually when your conscious becomes tired, it can no longer stand guard. And that's when it goes into the subconscious mind does not distinguish between what's good and what's bad. The subconscious mind simply gives prowess, power, and importance to what is consistently being consumed. You have to guard your gates. You're going to have to control what comes in. You're going to have to know when to have the TV on, when to have it off, what movies to see, what movies not to see. You've got to actually understand just how powerful this stuff is. Your subconscious mind controls 96% of your behavior. Your decision making, your automatic habitual behaviors are all controlled by your subconscious. The prime example, you're riding home from work one evening and you get caught up in a phone conversation and you're on the phone conversation and you're emotional and you're talking to whoever you're talking to about what you don't like or what happened at work today, whatever. And you look up and you're pulling in the driveway and you can't remember driving the last 15 minutes of your trip home. You don't remember, did I run the stop sign? Did I run the red light? You don't remember why? Because your subconscious drove you home. Your conscious mind was focused on that phone call, but the subconscious has made that trip so many times that it knew what to do and it took over. When someone walks up, when a dog comes towards you, if you had a bad experience with a dog, when a dog comes to you, before you even think, you're already responding with fear. The fears hit you. Why? Because the subconscious mind has already determined that dogs are dangerous, and it's already got you responding before you've actually processed it with your conscious mind. Your subconscious mind processes 400 billion bits of information per second. Your conscious mind can only process 2,000 bits. So what you tell yourself is important is what the subconscious mind is going to feed you, unless it's constantly being fed something that is contrary. And then it'll feed you that, and you'll be behaving diametrically opposed to what you say you want to be, what you want to do, and how you want your life to come out. That's why so many people are stuck in ruts, because they haven't controlled the programming. They don't control what they're downloading, and they're downloading things that are influencing their subconscious behavior. What am I getting? I'm saying this to say we have to hold people like Tyler Perry accountable. I'm not going to attack the movie. I heard about a lot of it, but that's typical. Tyler Perry movies has never been known for the quality of the movie, of the cinematography. That's not strength. Tyler Perry movies are big on emotional grab. They come out and they snatch you at the heart. It's so many people that have experienced at some level what he shows, and it gets them, and it pulls them in. They can relate to that in their lives. And there's something about being able to relate to something. You connect to it. And if you connect to it emotionally, you're deeply invested in it. And then you've got this one person who can consistently feed that addiction. And so you keep going back and you keep going back. My thing is, let's start getting some of the positive stuff. Let's start getting some of the alternative outcomes, some of the alternative realities. Let's start looking at what it could look like if we came together and actually became a unit. If we started rebuilding homes where there's masculine and feminine energy in both homes. Let's get to that point. I wasn't planning on going this far, but I wasn't planning on spending as much time on rebutting the socioeconomic topic that I got into on the front end. But I had to do that. I'm not going to hold you guys any longer. We push it to an hour. I try not to ever let my stuff go over an hour. Joel is asking now. Here, Joel is going to push me over the hour. Watch. Okay, Joel is asking, how do we hold him accountable? You hold them accountable by not spending money on movies that only show the negative side of our experience, by letting him know that we're going to need him to bring us something more positive, something that shows the alternative reality. One of the greatest and most powerful ways to protest is the withholding of your money. See, we don't have to spend with Tyler Perry. We spend with Tyler Perry because it's what we desire. He's feeding a need. We need to readjust and ask him to feed a different need. And on that note, I'm going to get off of here. You guys have a great day.